Comey says he's innocent after his two-count indictment by a federal grand jury. He's charged with making a false statement and obstruction related to his testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee in 2020. And this comes just days after President Trump publicly demanded the Justice Department prosecute Comey and other political enemies. Now Comey's denying those allegations in a video post.
My family and I have known for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump. But we couldn't imagine ourselves living any other way. We will not live on our knees, and you shouldn't either. My heart is broken for the Department of Justice, but I have great confidence in the federal judicial system, and I'm innocent. So let's have a trial and keep the faith.
ABC News Washington Bureau Managing Editor Catherine Falders and legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer are here with more on that. So, Catherine, walk us through this indictment and how it came together.
Well, it came together rather hastily. As we know, this has been something that's just really played out this week after Trump appointed Lindsay Halligan as former defense attorney to lead that office. She presented to the grand jury by herself alone, which I know, as Brian knows well, that's highly unusual. Usually your assistant U.S. attorneys go and present to the grand jury, but she didn't have that. And it's because I'm told by sources that most people in that office declined to help her with this, given that they believe that there wasn't enough probable cause or evidence to ultimately bring charges. So she presented herself to the grand jury yesterday afternoon, and this all played out in the courthouse after the fact before a magistrate judge when they returned the indictment. Originally, they had two different pieces of paper, and we learned that one of the charges that they were trying to seek on a false statement was actually declined by the grand jury. Of course, the other two, the ones you mentioned there of lying to Congress and obstruction of a congressional proceeding, were in fact verified by the grand jury.
Brian, how serious are these charges, and what will prosecutors have to prove?
So, Diane, the charges are serious in the sense that they do carry a potential maximum of 5 years in prison if convicted. We do know, though, based on federal sentencing guidelines, if Comey is convicted, and that is an if because we don't even know what the arraignment is or a lot of information going forward, and he's already calling for a trial, it would likely be a lot less. But in order for the prosecution to be successful here, they have to show that Comey willfully and knowingly made a false, fictitious, or misleading statement when it came to whether or not he had authorized another person, as the indictment argues, to leak information to the media. The second charge, I believe it is obstruction for the same statement, but it doesn't actually say what Comey is allegedly obstructing and what statement it is. It could be a different statement, but the assumption is it's the same one. And they have to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. The difficulty in this is the ability to prove intent, to prove that he knows, or he knew, when he made that statement, he was lying and not just misunderstanding or whatever it may be. Intent is hard to prove in a case like this.
Catherine, this all stems from testimony Comey gave in 2020, where he said he didn't authorize an anonymous leak to the press. What more can you tell us about that?
Pointed out, this indictment really, it's only 2 pages. It doesn't say exactly the statement that they're charging here, but it is the statement from his Senate testimony in 2020 in a back and forth exchange that Comey had with Ted Cruz. And of course, the question is whether they'll be able to prove intent. And Cruz is essentially summarizing testimony that Comey gave 3 years prior to that. There's questions about whether the summary of that testimony was really accurate or not. But of course, Comey goes back and forth with Cruz over whether or not he authorized his then Deputy Director of the FBI, Andy McCabe, to release information to the media. It gets a bit complicated and weedsy here, but the reality is it comes down to whether they can improve intent or not. And prosecutors in that office, most of them don't believe that they can.
Brian, you're a defense attorney. How do you expect Comey's attorneys to approach this case?
So the big umbrella arguments that we as defense attorneys make is either one, the prosecution can't prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt because they can't put forward the sufficient amount of information, or two, the client is innocent because of an alternative theory or alternative argument. Here, which is interesting as well, is the prior U.S. attorney, Siebert, in this case, actually had a memo listing out why he believed this case shouldn't go forward. So now, unlike most normal cases, the defense has a third alternative. Someone in that office, prior to being terminated by the president, actually gave them an outline as to why this case doesn't work. And that will definitely be used at the heart of the defense's case.
All right, Catherine Falders, Brian Buckmeyer, thank you both.